A grand wedding is taking place in a massive cathedral, but the mood is anything but celebratory. Flora Safabayda Advice is the bride, and she looks like she's walking toward her own execution instead of a marriage. The nobles in the crowd aren't even trying to hide their gossiping, whispering behind their fans as she passes by. Flora is sweating and terrified because she's just an orphan substitute being sold off to an enemy nation. Her eyes are full of fear because she knows exactly who she's about to marry. The man waiting for her is Atil Slonial Nordvain VIII, and his silhouette alone is enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. Rumor has it, he's a total tyrant who climbed a mountain of bodies to take the throne for himself. The poor girl can barely keep it together, just looking at the monster she's meant to call a husband. Atil steps into view, looking every bit the cold and untouchable emperor his reputation suggests. He has a stern, disinterested expression as he prepares for the ceremony to begin. The entire room goes dead silent as he walks by, with nobody daring to make eye contact with him. He doesn't even glance at his guests, keeping his hand on his sword like he's expecting an assassination. They finally stand together at the altar, but there's zero warmth between the two of them. Flora has her eyes squeezed shut, probably praying she can just disappear. The emperor looks completely bored as he reaches for the wedding rings. He slides the ring onto her finger with zero emotion, treating the whole thing like a chore. Looking down at the ring, the girl looks absolutely miserable about her new reality. She looks small and broken standing next to him, and even the priest seems a bit on edge. When it's her turn, Flora's hand is shaking so much she can barely pick up the ring. She ends up fumbling it, and the ring drops right back onto the cushion with a soft thud. She panics immediately, thinking she's just offended a man who kills for sport. A hand reaches out to fix her mistake before things get worse. Atil picks up the ring himself, looking at it like it's just a minor annoyance. He looks over at her, catching her completely off guard with his gaze. To everyone's total shock, the tyrant actually drops down to one knee before her. He takes her gloved hand and places a firm kiss on the back of it. It's the most romantic thing anyone's seen him do, but Flora still looks like she's in a state of total shock. But as soon as the kiss is done, he stands up and immediately turns to walk away. He leaves the cathedral without another word, leaving his new bride standing there all alone. Later that night, the girl is taken to her new room to prepare for the wedding night. She tries to wash away some of the stress in a warm bath, looking totally exhausted. Her maid, Vishy, is there to help her out, but the girl is too busy blushing and worrying about her husband. The massive imperial bed is waiting for her, and the sight of it is pretty intimidating. She gets dressed in a thin nightgown, feeling completely exposed and vulnerable. But when her feet are revealed, you can see the truth: they're covered in nasty blisters from years of forced endurance. She stands by the bed, with her long hair draped over her shoulders, waiting in silence. Flora is clearly dreading the moment her husband finally walks through that door. An hour passes by, and she's still just sitting there on the edge of the bed, in the dim light. She notices a fancy gift box left on the desk and goes over to check it out. She slowly unties the pink ribbon, wondering what kind of gift a tyrant would even give. Inside, she finds a delicate lacy accessory, but the gift doesn't really do much to ease her mind. Flora just stares at it, more confused than ever about what this man actually wants from her. Back when Flora Safabayda Advice was being prepared for this marriage, she was given a final, chilling warning. The woman who raised her held her face firmly, making it clear that she was nothing more than a disposable, sacrificial lamb. With a sinister smile, she reminded the girl that if she didn't play her part perfectly, her life would be over anyway. Even now, the memory of that cold, threatening touch makes her blood run cold. Returning to the present, Flora stands alone in the quiet palace, clutching the box he gave her. The hallways are dark and oppressive, and she feels like a ghost wandering through a massive tomb. She starts walking through the corridors in her nightgown, her heart hammering against her ribs with every step. Her nerves finally get the better of her, and she accidentally knocks over a vase, sending it shattering across the floor. The noise echoes through the hall, and she suddenly finds herself face to face with Atil Slonial Nordvain VIII. But he's not the cold emperor she saw earlier. He's a mess, clutching his head in absolute agony. He roars for her to get out, his voice cracking with a mix of pain and violent rage. He's sweating and his eyes are wild, looking like he's losing a fight against something inside his own mind. A dark red aura starts to swirl around him as he struggles to keep his grip on reality. In his trance, he's haunted by visions of death and decay, completely consumed by a curse he can't control. His eyes glow a hellish red as the pain reaches its absolute breaking point. But then, a sudden flash of yellow flowers appears in his mind, a memory of a much kinder time. He sees a woman laughing in a field, and for a split second, the darkness in his mind starts to recede. He snaps back to the present, gasping for air as the vision fades away and leaves him drained. Flora has followed the noise and finds him like this, looking more vulnerable than she ever thought possible. She stops in her tracks, her eyes wide with fear as she realizes she's just walked into a nightmare. She tries to hide behind her handkerchief, hoping that if she stays quiet, he won't notice her. She ducks out onto a nearby balcony, her eyes wide as she witnesses the tyrant's moment of weakness from the shadows. She stands by the open window, the cold night air doing nothing to calm her racing heart. Suddenly, she senses a presence behind her and turns around, her breath hitching in her throat. Before she can run, Atil lunges forward and grabs her by the front of her dress. He pulls her into a desperate embrace, his strength nearly crushing the breath out of her body. He leans in close, his face buried in her neck, as if her scent is the only medicine he needs. Flora's eyes go wide with shock, her entire body going stiff in the tyrant's sudden grip. He holds her tightly from behind, refusing to let go as the madness in his eyes begins to clear. "Why, Your Majesty?" she cries out, her voice trembling as she tries to understand what's happening. He doesn't answer, instead pinning her against the door with a desperate animalistic energy. The girl is gasping for breath, while his face is pressed against her, seeking the scent that calms his mind. Her head lolls back as the intensity of the moment becomes too much for her to handle. Atil looks at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated relief, his red eyes finally starting to dim. Once the fit has fully passed, he sweeps her up into his arms with surprising ease. He carries her back to her room and stands by the bed as she huddles under the covers. He looms over her, his expression turning cold and distant again as if the previous few minutes never happened. Flora pulls the blankets tight and begs him to leave her alone, her voice small and broken. Atil just stares down at her, his silhouette dark and intimidating against the bedroom light. He sits on the edge of the bed and reaches for her, making the girl flinch away in terror. She covers her eyes with her hands, waiting for a blow that she's absolutely sure is coming. But Atil just grabs her wrists, forcing her to look at him as he struggles with the last of his own frustration. After the chaos of the night, Atil Sloniel Nordvane 8 finally calms down, sitting on the edge of the bed while Flora Saphibeta Advice watches him with a mix of fear and confusion. Flora looks up at him from the pillows, her eyes heavy with exhaustion as the adrenaline from her terror finally begins to fade away. The room falls into a heavy, awkward silence as the Emperor remains by her side, the intensity of his earlier fit having left them both completely drained. Atil leans down toward her again, his face hovering just inches from her skin as he tries to understand the strange phenomenon he just experienced. He inhales deeply, realizing that her natural scent acts like a powerful sedative, instantly quieting the madness that usually claws at his mind. His red eyes are still wide with shock, and sweat beads on his forehead as he realizes he's found a cure he never thought existed. He suddenly pulls away and stands up, looking completely stunned by the fact that this frail girl was able to suppress his pain so easily. The next morning, Vishy throws open the heavy curtains, letting the bright sunlight flood into the room and signal a new day. Flora slowly opens her eyes, her mind still a fog as she tries to piece together the terrifying events of the previous night. She sits up and rubs her eyes, feeling a strange sense of relief despite the encounter. But the memory of his touch makes her heart race. As she looks around the empty room, she remembers the way Atil held her, and her face instantly begins to heat up in a deep blush. She covers her mouth in shock, wondering if she's losing her mind or if the Emperor really spent the night in her private chambers. Vishy approaches her with a bright smile, looking far more excited than usual for a typical morning routine. The maid starts talking about how romantic everything seemed, her imagination clearly running wild as she sees the rumpled bedsheets. In Vishy's mind, the two of them had a passionate fairy tale night, and she looks at her mistress with newfound respect. Flora dives back under the covers in embarrassment, her soul practically leaving her body as Vishy continues to gush over the royal couple. Eventually, Vishy gets her out of bed and starts braiding her long hair, treating her with the care of a true empress. Flora stares at her reflection, her cheeks still flushed as she tries to process her terrifying yet confusing new reality in this palace. Once she's fully dressed, she looks absolutely radiant, though her expression remains hesitant and unsure of her future. Vishy holds her hands and tells her how beautiful she looks, clearly proud of how well her mistress is fitting into the role. Flora sits at her vanity for a moment longer, her mind drifting back to a darker time when things weren't so peaceful for her. She remembers the way the nobles used to whisper about her, calling her a bringer of misfortune, and warning everyone to stay away. In her memory, she huddles alone in the dark, a small, unwanted girl who was treated like a curse by everyone around her. The weight of those old words still hurts, and she clutches her head as the old anxiety threatens to pull her back into the shadows. She takes a shaky breath and presses her hand to her heart, trying to convince herself that she's safe from those people now. A sudden knock at the door breaks her train of thought, and Vichy goes to see who has arrived at such an early hour. It's Cecil Brittany Nord, and he's arrived with an ornate jewelry box, looking very official and composed. When he opens it, a stunning set of sapphire jewelry sparkles in the light, a lavish gift sent directly from the Emperor. Flora and Vichy both stare at the gems in awe, the pure beauty of the gift momentarily washing away Flora's deep-seated fears. Cecil bows and takes his leave, having fulfilled his duty as the imperial messenger for the morning. He maintains his perfect professional composure as he exits, though he's well aware of the gossip starting to spread. Outside, he is stopped by Evelyn Graf Zaraski, a noblewoman who is clearly not happy with the current turn of events. As a duke's daughter, Evelyn has her own ambitions for the crown, and the news of the Emperor's interest in the bride is a direct threat. Cecil gives her a polite but brief bow, knowing better than to get caught up in her obvious jealousy and schemes. Meanwhile, deep within the Imperial Palace's private library, the atmosphere is quiet and heavy with focus. Attil is at his desk, buried in a mountain of paperwork, but his mind is clearly lingering on something else entirely. He keeps seeing a vision of Flora smiling and radiant, her image burned into his mind after their intense encounter. He realizes that the calming scent he smelled wasn't a perfume, but her own natural body smell a scent that holds the key to his peace. He leans back and sighs, his expression a mix of intrigue and frustration as he thinks about the fragile girl who now holds such power over him. He wonders how someone so small and seemingly weak could possibly have such a profound effect on his ancient curse. He taps his finger impatiently on the desk, his mind racing as he tries to decide exactly what his next move with her should be. Later, he sits at a long dining table for a formal meal, flanked by Cecil and his most trusted imperial guards. Cecil Brittany Nord stands ready to serve the Emperor, his expression remaining calm and professional despite the morning's tension. Erangina, the stoic captain of the Imperial Guard, stands alert at the Emperor's side, ever watchful of his surroundings. Attil Sloniel Nordvane VIII sits at the dining table, looking visibly irritated as a small vein throbs on his temple from his mounting frustration. He rests his chin on his hand, clearly lost in thought and annoyed by the oppressive silence of the morning meal. His crimson eyes narrow, reflecting the inner turmoil and the lingering effects of the curse that continues to plague his mind. Suddenly, the grand doors open, and Flora Safabida Advice enters the room, dressed in a beautiful light blue gown that contrasts with the dark hall. She carries a bright, hopeful smile on her face, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of morning excitement and lingering nerves. Attil looks up with a start, his expression one of pure shock at her unexpected appearance and her strangely radiant demeanor. Cecil and Aaron watch the exchange with quiet curiosity, observing the Emperor's unusually intense reaction to his new bride's arrival. Flora looks absolutely delighted to see him, her joy momentarily masking the fear she felt the night before. Attil's gaze remains fixed on her, his thoughts a dark swirl of confusion as he struggles to maintain his cold, imperial exterior. Flora walks confidently toward the table, her presence seeming to fill the cavernous dining hall with light. However, as she gets closer, her confidence begins to waver under the weight of Attil's piercing and unreadable stare. Erangina keeps a watchful eye on the young woman, his hand instinctively resting near the hilt of his sword. Flora's face pales as she notices the grim, silent expressions of the men at the table, her initial joy quickly turning into a cold anxiety. Pushing through her fear, she reaches out and presents a large, beautiful bouquet of fresh pink flowers to the Emperor. Attil leans forward slightly, the sweet scent of the blossoms reaching him, though it is nothing compared to the girl's own natural fragrance. Flora blushes deeply, her heart pounding in her chest as she waits for any kind of response or acknowledgement from him. She holds the bouquet out with both hands, her gaze fixed firmly on the tabletop to avoid his terrifyingly sharp eyes. She carefully adjusts the wrapping of the flowers, her fingers trembling slightly from the sheer pressure of the Emperor's presence. She offers him a small, shy smile, hoping that this simple gift might help bridge the icy gap between them. Attil's eyes widen as a sudden, sharp memory flashes through his mind, triggered by the innocent sight of the flowers. He remembers Pefmia Cecilia, her long red hair flowing as she once held a similar bundle of blooms with a pure, joyful laugh. He looks away, his cold expression softening into a pained sort of melancholy as his past and present begin to collide in his mind. Flora and Attil sit at opposite ends of a massive dining table. It's their wedding dinner, but the vibe is anything but celebratory. Attil holds a bouquet of pink flowers, though his expression is as cold as the room. Flora watches him carefully, unsure of what her new husband is thinking. He sets the flowers aside without a word. While he sips his wine, his gaze doesn't leave her for a second. Flora tries to focus on her food, but she's clearly on edge. He clicks his glass onto the table. Surprisingly, Atil stands up and offers his hand, asking her to join him. She looks up, her face flushing at the sudden invitation. Her hand trembles slightly as she reaches out. Flora takes his hand, agreeing that it would be an honor to walk with him. They head out into the garden, leaving the tense atmosphere of the dining hall behind. But the walk isn't exactly peaceful. Flora is struggling to keep up. Sweat beads on her face as she tries to hide her discomfort. She hitches up her heavy skirts, forcing herself to maintain the pace behind him. Atil stops and looks back at his new empress. He doesn't say anything, just stares with those sharp red eyes. His intense gaze makes Flora freeze in her tracks. They stand in the quiet of the garden for a long moment. Suddenly, a woman in a pink dress breaks the silence by waving them down. This is Ibelin, and she seems way too happy to see the emperor. She drops into a graceful curtsy, putting on a perfect performance of a loyal subject. Flora can't help but feel small under the other woman's bright energy. Ibelin immediately starts chatting, completely ignoring the awkwardness between the newlyweds. Atil doesn't look particularly impressed by the interruption. Ibelin leans in close, her eyes fixed on Flora's expensive jewelry. She reaches out to touch the necklace, checking out the gems with a greedy glint in her eye. Her friendly mask slips for just a second, revealing something much colder underneath. Ibelin whispers something to Flora, her shadow looming over the blonde girl. Flora manages a polite nod, even though she's clearly uncomfortable. Ibelin laughs and crosses her arms, acting like she owns the place. She practically crowds into Atil's personal space, trying to grab his attention back. It doesn't work. Atil just turns and starts walking away. Flora is left standing there as a dark mood settles over the garden. She watches them walk away, feeling like an outsider in her own marriage. She wraps her arms around herself, the cold air finally catching up to her. Back in the safety of her chambers, the long day is finally over. Her maid, Vichy, helps her sit down on the bed to start undressing. But as soon as Vichy pulls back the hem of her dress, she gasps in horror. Flora just looks exhausted, her energy completely spent. Vichy holds up a white cloth stained with bright red blood from Flora's feet. The maid bursts into tears, while a tired Flora tries her best to calm her down. A heavy knock echoes through the room, startling the quiet air. Flora flinches, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and worry. The door bursts open as Cecil, the royal physician, rushes in with Vichy close behind him. Flora clutches at her dress, looking completely overwhelmed by the sudden intrusion. Cecil drops to one knee before her, telling her not to worry as he prepares to examine her. He carefully takes her bare foot in his gloved hands, revealing the raw, red blisters on her heel. He starts cleaning the wound, his movements precise and clinical. Flora winces at the sting, a bright blush spreading across her face from the embarrassment of it all. As Cecil begins to wrap her foot in clean bandages, Flora watches him with a silent, heavy heart. 5 days pass, and the thick layers of gauze are a constant reminder of the physical toll she's taken. Flora spends her time confined to a chair, her feet propped up to let the wounds heal. Vichy is right there with her, hovering anxiously as she tries to make her mistress comfortable. Flora stares off into space, her mind clearly elsewhere as the night sets in. Vichy is being her usual dramatic self, insisting that she's strong enough to carry Flora wherever she needs to go. She actually manages to hoist Flora onto her back, though the poor girl looks absolutely mortified. A sudden misstep sends them both off balance. Flora's eyes widen in panic as the world starts to tilt. They both end up in a heap on the floor, right in front of the Emperor and Cecil. Vichy is face down on the rug while Flora tries to scramble back to a seated position. Atil stands over them, his shirt hanging open and a look of pure annoyance on his face. Flora looks up at him, her face turning a deep shade of red at the sight of her husband half-dressed. Before she can even stammer out an apology, Atil reaches down and grabs her arm. He hauls her up against him, his bare chest pressing close as Flora freezes in total shock. Without a single word of warning, he scoops her up into his arms. Atil turns and carries her through the hall, his stride long and determined. He shoots a sharp look over his shoulder, coldly ordering the other two to leave them alone. Vichy and Cecil are left behind, looking absolutely terrified by the Emperor's sudden temper. He brings her into a dimly lit bedroom, where the large bed dominates the space. Atil drops her onto the soft mattress, the sudden movement knocking the wind out of her. He leans over her immediately, pinning her down as Flora's heart starts to race. His expression is dark and intense, his red eyes boring into hers. Flora is trapped beneath his weight, her hands trembling as she stares up at him. She can barely breathe, the tension in the room becoming almost unbearable. He reaches for her, his eyes focused on her, as if he's searching for something. Attil leans in close to her neck, his breath warm against her skin as Flora shuts her eyes tight. He seems almost entranced, the chaotic energy around him finally starting to settle down. Flora's eyes fill with tears, her mind flashing back to a time when touch only meant pain. In her memory, a stern woman named Pefmia Cecilia stands over her with a cane, lecturing her about the virtue of endurance. A younger Flora cowers on the floor, being told that she must learn to put up with any hardship. She remembers the lonely nights she spent, curled up on the cold floor of her old home. Even when she was sick with a fever, no one came to help or comfort her. She was always expected to just deal with the pain, whether it was a scraped knee or a broken spirit. A single tear escapes Flora's eye, tracing a path down her flushed cheek. Attil freezes, her vulnerability catching him completely off guard. "We are husband and wife, aren't we?" she whispers, her voice trembling as she looks up at him from the bed. The weight of her words hits Attil like a physical blow, leaving him momentarily speechless. He quickly turns away, covering his mouth as a deep, uncontrollable blush creeps up his neck. He maintains a stoic profile, though the tension in his shoulders betrays his internal turmoil. Flora leans toward him, her heart sinking as she worries she said something wrong. Attil clutches his head, the sudden rush of conflicting emotions making his mind race. "Yes, I'm sorry," she murmurs, her eyes downcast as she retreats. Attil sits on the bed and gently places his hand on her bandaged leg, his touch surprisingly tender. In a chibi moment of jealousy, Attil fumes while Flora looks on, confused by his sudden change in mood. "Still, you seem to trust Cecil quite a lot, don't you?" he asks, his voice laced with a hint of suspicion. Flora blinks in surprise, her face heating up at the unexpected sharpness in his tone. Without waiting for an answer, Attil reaches out and firmly takes hold of her wrist. He pulls her toward him, the world around them seemingly fading away into a soft, shimmering glow. Attil's gaze softens as he looks at her, his own face still burning with a faint blush. He draws her into a tight embrace, burying his face against her as he lets out a shaky breath. Flora is stunned, her eyes wide as she leans against his broad chest. He holds her closer, the scent of her skin acting like a balm to his frayed nerves. Attil runs his fingers through her long golden hair, his movements slow and rhythmic. He leans his forehead against her, finally finding a moment of peace in her presence. "Damn it! I lost control again," he mutters to himself, his eyes wide with a mix of frustration and realization. He pulls back just enough to look at her, his expression a complicated mess of emotions. Flora's eyes have drifted shut, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to her. Attil watches her sleep, his irritation having vanished, replaced by a quiet, protective resolve. She looks so peaceful as she slumbers on the bed, her golden hair fanned out around her. He sits on the edge of the mattress, letting out a long, heavy sigh as he watches over her. He rubs his face with his hand, trying to shake off the lingering heat of the moment. Michel Lawrence, the Imperial Chamberlain, is introduced with a polite, welcoming smile. He is busy managing the affairs of the palace, his presence a constant in the Imperial household. Attil sits on a plush chair, his arms crossed and his face set in a stern, thoughtful mask. He oversees the process of measuring Flora's foot, determined to resolve the shoe issue once and for all. "That's strange," he thinks, his eyes narrowing. "Why would a princess of a kingdom wear shoes that don't fit?" His red eyes glow with a cold, calculating light as he begins to piece together the truth of her treatment. Michel breaks into a nervous sweat, sensing the sudden, dangerous shift in the Emperor's mood. Attil's aura becomes oppressive, his anger toward those who mistreated Flora beginning to boil over. Michel bows low, his voice trembling as he tries to maintain his composure under the Emperor's glare. Attil remains silent, his profile sharp and unforgiving against the backdrop of the room. He opens his hand, as if weighing the fate of those who had dared to neglect his wife. Tiny versions of the attendants work tirelessly, measuring every detail of Flora's foot with comical precision. They scurry around with a measuring tape, ensuring that the new shoes will be nothing less than perfect. Back in the quiet of his thoughts, Attil leans on his hand, a soft blush returning to his face as he remembers Flora. Duke Grask stares at the latest reports, his face darkening with rage as he realizes his plans are being thwarted. With a violent sweep of his hand, he sends a porcelain vase crashing to the floor, shards of white clay flying everywhere. Flora Safibeta Advice winces at the distant sound of breaking glass, the echoes of the Duke's past rages still haunting her. She lowers her gaze, the shadow of her mistreatment in Padania lingering like a ghost in the corners of her mind. A dazzling collection of jewelry and perfumes, gifts from the emperor, sits on her table, a luxury she never dreamed of owning. Flora stands amidst the opulence, her eyes wandering to Atil Sloniel Nordvane 8 as he works silently at his desk. She tries on a magnificent necklace, a small, tentative smile gracing her lips as she catches her reflection. Despite her presence, Atil remains buried in his paperwork, his cold indifference a barrier she doesn't know how to cross. Even when I tried so hard to appeal to him, he never reacted at all, she thinks, her heart heavy with rejection. Meanwhile, Evelyn Graf Zaraski, the woman originally intended to be the bride, watches with a cold, calculating gaze. I can't just sit back and watch anymore. She seethes, her resentment toward the substitute empress boiling over. She throws open the door and calls for her father, her voice ringing with a demand for immediate action. Duke Grask, known as Hobe Grask, continues to write his letters, his manipulative schemes reaching ever further into the palace. Flora's thoughts drift back to the day of her departure, the memory of her wedding still bittersweet. She remembers standing in her bridal gown, a disposable pawn being traded away into a life of uncertainty. She recalls the moment Atil stood before her, his imposing figure, a mix of the tyrant emperor and a man she barely knew. Tears had welled in her eyes then, the fear of the unknown clashing with a desperate hope for a better life. Hobe Grask had held her with a false warmth, his comforting words masking the cruel ambition that drove him. Back in the sunlight of the palace, Vichy the maid shares a laugh with Cecil Brittany Nord, their presence a rare comfort to Flora. Flora sits among the blooming flowers, her golden blonde hair glowing as she finds a moment of genuine peace. Cecil kneels before her, his touch professional and gentle as he tends to her injured leg with practiced care. Atil stands in the doorway, his arms crossed as he observes the scene with a dark, brooding intensity. Flora is startled as she notices him, her smile instantly vanishing under the weight of his unreadable gaze. "You were smiling so happily just a moment ago," he says, his voice low and possessive as he stares her down. Atil sits back with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with his usual cold gaze. While he broods, Cecil starts applying medicine to the nasty blisters on the girl's feet. The doctor moves quickly, clearly used to dealing with injuries even if they're on a royal. He gets a real close look at the damage, realizing she's been walking on these for way too long. Both men get pretty serious when they see the state she's in, and the vibe in the room gets heavy. It's clear they're starting to suspect she wasn't treated very well back home. Cecil reports back to the emperor, noting that these aren't just from one day of walking. That news definitely hits a nerve, making Atil look more than a little annoyed. He stands up and stares her down, though his expression is more intense than actually angry. Flora's just sitting there like a deer in headlights, not sure why he's suddenly so focused on her. Then, he reaches out and grabs her foot himself, which was definitely not what she expected. Her whole face turns bright red as she tries to figure out what's going through his head. Instead of letting the doctor do it, Atil takes over and starts applying the ointment himself. He dips his finger into the gold jar, surprisingly careful for a guy with his reputation. He doesn't say a word, just focuses on rubbing the cream into her sore heels. He's even got a bit of a flush going on too, though he's trying his best to look stoic. Flora's heart is basically beating out of her chest as she clutches her dress in shyness. The grand hallway feels totally different now, like the air itself is getting a bit warmer. Later on, her maid Vichy comes barging in, completely unaware of the mood shift. She's super hyped, holding up a new nightgown that's, well, a bit on the thin side. Flora is immediately against it, but Vichy isn't taking no for an answer and starts pushing her along. The maid starts getting her ready, chatting away about how she needs to win the emperor over. She even pulls out a secret weapon, a love manual she's been hiding. She's practically beaming as she hands it over, acting like it's the key to survival. Vichy is all in on this plan, looking way too excited for her own good. Flora starts flipping through the pages, and the stuff she's seeing has her completely stunned. She's basically a walking tomato at this point, but she can't exactly throw the book away. That evening, she finds Atil waiting for her and tries to greet him as casually as possible. She's wearing a stunning new gown that actually fits, looking a lot more like a real empress. She's still super nervous though, unable to meet his eyes for more than a second. Atil just stands there looming over her, taking in the new look without saying much. A few other maids show up with a bunch of trays, and they're all filled with new shoes. Atil takes a seat, looking like he owns the place while the staff presents his latest gift. He reaches out and grabs her wrist, pulling her closer so she has to stand right in front of him. She nearly trips over her own feet, but he catches her and holds her steady. He picks up one of the custom-made shoes, giving it a quick look before getting ready to put it on her. He slides the shoe on, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like her feet are being crushed. Flora stands up and gives it a spin, looking pretty impressed with how comfortable they are. Seeing her actually happy for once seems to satisfy Atil, and he even lets a tiny smile slip. But the comfort only makes her think about how different things used to be back in her home kingdom. She remembers huddling on the floor, surrounded by old, worn-out shoes that offered zero protection. And she definitely hasn't forgotten Pefmia Cecilia, the woman who made sure every day was a struggle. Flora looks down, clutching her dress as she tries to hide her nervousness from the Emperor. Atil stares at her, his own expression unreadable, but clearly affected by her presence. She remembers a moment from her childhood, perhaps the only time she felt a different kind of warmth. Flora's face is a mess of blushes and tears as she struggles to find the right words. She finally gathers her courage and asks a question that stops him in his tracks. "Could you hold me?" Atil is completely stunned, his face heating up as he takes in his bride's unexpected request. He pulls her into his arms, and she finally relaxes, feeling a sense of security she's never known. He holds her close, his sharp gaze softening as he looks down at her. But even in this moment of peace, his eyes reveal a flicker of something dark and intense. Meanwhile, Lady Ibelin Graf-Zaraski sits in her own quarters, elegantly sipping tea while she schemes. Her expression is cold and calculating, clearly displeased with the reports she's hearing from the palace. She looks at the blue flowers nearby, her thoughts likely filled with the power she's determined to keep. Back in the room, Atil stands up, his posture tense as if he's fighting back an invisible force. Flora watches him with concern, sensing that something is very wrong with her husband. He's clearly in agony, sweat dripping down his face as he clutches his chest. Ibelin bows her head, but there's a dark, satisfied look in her eyes that she isn't even trying to hide. Atil stands there in the dim light, the shadows around him looking heavier than ever. As he walks off, Ibelin watches him go with a smirk that says she's exactly where she wants to be. The Emperor's mind is a storm of noise and pain, a constant ringing in his ears that he can't escape. Visions of the throne and the blood spilled together flash before his eyes like a nightmare. He screams internally for the voices to stop, the shadows threatening to consume him completely. He leans against the wall, gasping for air as the episode finally starts to subside. He makes his way back to Flora's room, drawn to her like she's his only lifeline. Flora is fast asleep, looking peaceful and radiant amidst the blue flowers of her bedding. Atil stands over her bed, looking down at the woman who holds the accidental cure to his madness. He reaches out a trembling hand, the darkness still clinging to his form. He leans in closer, and the moment he's near her, the shadowy aura begins to vanish. He buries his face in her neck, breathing in the natural scent that suppresses his violent headaches. It's the first time he's felt actual relief in years, and he clings to her like a drowning man. The room is quiet now, with the dawn light just starting to filter in through the window. Flora starts to stir, her eyes fluttering open as she feels someone close to her. Atil doesn't move, just resting his head against her as if he never wants to let go. She looks up at him, her heart skipping a beat when she realizes just how intimate they are. Her hand reaches out to touch his hair, her touch hesitant but full of warmth. He leans down, his face just inches from hers, and the air between them feels electric. Flora's eyes widen in surprise, her breath catching as she sees the vulnerability in his gaze. Atil pulls her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her shoulder as if hiding from the world. Flora's brain practically short-circuits, her inner chibi self freaking out at the sudden cuddle. She covers her face with her hands, her whole body shaking with embarrassment. The next morning, Atil is rubbing his temples, looking like he's trying to piece together the night before. Flora is staring at him with a look of pure dread, clearly wondering if he remembers the cuddle. Then she suddenly realizes just how close they were and turns into a total blushing mess. Flora and Atil are sitting on the bed, the tension between them thicker than the palace walls. Flora's blushing so hard she's practically glowing, her eyes fixed on the man she's supposed to be married to. Atil looks equally stunned, his usual cold mask completely gone as he stares back at her. They're so close, their noses are almost touching, and the world outside the room seems to have stopped existing. Atil's eyes drop to her lips for a second, and you can tell he's fighting every instinct he has. His red eyes are wide with surprise, a single bead of sweat rolling down his face as the silence stretches out. He's totally frozen, looking like he's never been in this situation before, despite being an emperor. Flora bites her lip, looking up at him with a mix of curiosity and sheer embarrassment. She reaches out, her hand hesitant as she tries to navigate this weird new reality. Suddenly, the moment shifts, and they end up tangled together on the silk sheets. Flora's nightgown is a bit disheveled, and Atil's heart is probably hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He buries his face in his hands, his whole face turning a shade of red that matches his eyes. But he can't seem to pull away, drawn back to the proximity that finally brought him some peace. Flora leans in, her scent once again filling his senses and quieting the shadows in his mind. It's a moment of pure, unfiltered intimacy that neither of them expected when they woke up. He reaches out to cup her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek in a way that's almost too tender for a tyrant. Flora's breath catches in her throat, her eyes widening as she realizes just how far they've gone. She looks like a deer in headlights, her face flushed and her lips parted in a soft gasp. Atil pulls her closer, his forehead resting against hers as the last bits of his composure crumble. They're in their own little world, completely unaware that the morning routine of the palace is about to start. Atil's shirt is partially open, and the heat between them is starting to get very real. He leans into her neck, breathing in that calming scent one more time before reality kicks in. The scent, it's really strong, he mutters, though it's unclear if he's talking about the flowers or her. Clatter! The sound of the door opening echoes through the room like a gunshot. Vishy, the maid, stands there with a basin of water, her jaw practically hitting the floor. She takes in the sight of the emperor and the empress in bed together, and her brain just stops working. Her face turns pale with shock, realizing she's just walked into the most private moment imaginable. Atil and Flora spring apart, both of them looking like they've been caught committing a crime. Vishy doesn't wait for an explanation. She just bows her head so low she might fall over and makes a run for it. Bam! She slams the door shut, her heart racing as she tries to process what she just saw. Back inside, Flora is a stuttering mess, her inner chibi freaking out as she tries to explain herself to Atil. She's completely mortified, her face hidden in the shadows of her own embarrassment. Atil just clears his throat and looks away, his hand covering his mouth to hide his own blush. Flora eventually ends up on the floor, head down, practically begging for the earth to swallow her whole. Atil watches her with a look of utter confusion, wondering how things got so chaotic so fast. A little later, Flora is trying to have breakfast, but she can barely focus on her omelet. She keeps replaying the morning's events in her head, her eyes distant and glazed over. Vishy is right there with her, still looking a bit frazzled but clearly bursting with gossip. I can't believe it, Flora groans internally, her face heating up all over again. They end up looking through some books together, maybe trying to find some normalcy in the middle of all this madness. Flora tries to act like a proper empress, but she's clearly still rattled by the memory of the emperor's proximity. Meanwhile, Atil is already outside, looking stoic and imposing as he prepares to head out on his horse. Flora stands in the morning light, her face still warm with a deep blush as she looks back toward the palace. They're out in the gardens now, but the heavy tension from the bedroom hasn't faded one bit. Atil catches her eye, his expression unreadable but intense enough to make her heart skip a beat. The emperor seems slightly off balance himself, a rare hint of a blush touching his cheeks as he looks away from her. Flora can't help but feel a flutter in her chest, her hands clasped together as she struggles to remain composed. Atil steps closer, looming over her with a presence that's both intimidating and strangely magnetic. She looks up at him, her blue eyes wide and honest. And for a moment, the world outside this garden just disappears. Atil's gloved hand tightens around the leather reins, as if he's trying to steady his own racing thoughts. He mounts his stallion with practiced grace, looking down at the small woman who has completely upended his routine. He begins to ride off, the white horse's hooves kicking up dust as he heads toward the open fields. But he doesn't go far, slowing the horse to a trot and looking back at the golden-haired figure standing in the distance. Suddenly, he turns the horse around and gallops back toward her, his dark coat fluttering in the wind. Before she can even react, he reaches down, his hand extended toward her in a silent, commanding invitation. Flora's heart hammers against her ribs as she reaches out, her eyes squeezed shut in nervous anticipation. With a swift, powerful motion, Atil pulls her up onto the horse in front of him, claiming her place by his side. They ride out together into a vast field of golden flowers, the afternoon light painting the landscape in soft, warm hues. Flora leans back against his broad chest, finally letting go of her tension and just breathing in the scent of the field. She looks genuinely happy, a soft smile playing on her lips as she realizes she's safe in the Emperor's arms. In the back of Atil's mind, a memory of Pefmia Cecilia surfaces, a woman with hair the color of sunset, surrounded by flowers. He leans down, his face buried in Flora's blonde hair, seeking the same peace that once calmed his inner demons. He's completely captivated by her, the enemy king finally finding a moment of true rest with his substitute bride. They sit together on the horse, the world fading away as they find a quiet, unexpected connection in the middle of the field. The morning after the wedding, the royal bed sits empty. Vichy starts brushing Flora's long hair, trying to settle her nerves. The maid is clearly way more excited about the gossip than Flora is. Being this close to the tyrant is definitely making Flora's heart race. She completely freezes up when Atil reaches out to touch her. Atil looks remarkably calm. Despite his terrifying reputation, Flora is bright red, struggling to keep her composure. Vichy thinks it's hilarious that her lady is literally steaming. It's a lot for Flora to take in all at once. Chibi Flora is in full panic mode, while Vichy just eggs her on. Atil maintains his stoic mask, not letting any emotion slip through. Flora does her best to look like a proper empress, even if she's shaking inside. Those red eyes seem to be searching for something in her. He suddenly grabs her wrist, catching her off guard. Vichy is basically glowing with excitement at the sudden contact. Later, Flora finally relaxes and shares a genuine laugh with her maid. It's the first time she's actually felt like she could breathe in this palace. Vichy is just happy to see her lady finally acting like herself. The mood shifts when it's time to get down to business. Practice starts early, and it's not going to be easy. Flora swaps her gown for training gear and picks up a wooden sword. The pressure starts to get to her as the training turns serious. Atil doesn't go easy on her, swinging his sword with perfect precision. He brings the blade to a dead stop right at the tip of her nose. Flora hits the floor, staring up at the wood leveled at her face. Atil stands over her, silent, waiting for her next move. She looks up at him, wondering if he's actually trying to help her. He offers a hand and hauls her back onto her feet. Atil's gaze is heavy, like he's trying to figure her out. The sound of something shattering triggers a memory she's tried to bury. Suddenly, she's back there, a kid on the floor, while Pefmia Cecilia looms over her. The governess demanded perfection and had no patience for failure. The belt comes down before Flora can even get a word out. Pefmia didn't care about apologies, only absolute obedience. Flora was left bruised and trembling on the cold floor. In that house, every small mistake was met with violence. The memory hits with the same force as the actual belt did. Back in the present, Flora's face goes pale as the trauma takes hold. Atil clenches his fist, noticing the sudden fear in her eyes. Flora forces herself to stand tall, refusing to be that scared girl again. Atil stays silent, his gaze locked on her. In the reflection of his eye, Flora sees a woman who's determined to survive. After the intense training session, Flora tries to regain her composure. She slips away, heading toward the imperial baths for some much-needed peace. The room is filled with thick steam, hiding everything beyond a few feet. She starts to relax, letting down her guard for the first time all day. The warm water is perfect, exactly what her aching muscles needed. Suddenly, a hand reaches through the mist and grabs her wrist. Flora finds herself pulled right against Atil's bare chest. The Emperor is already there, and he doesn't look like he plans on leaving. She's completely caught off guard, her face turning a deep shade of red. She tries to look away, but there's nowhere for her to go in this small space. Atil pulls her even closer, his grip firm but strangely gentle. Her hand rests on his chest, and she can feel his heart beating just as fast as hers. He gives her a look that says he knows exactly what he's doing to her. Flora can barely breathe, let alone think of a way to escape this. He reaches for her shoulder, his touch sending a jolt through her. Their faces are so close she can feel his breath on her skin. Atil's hand slides up to her neck, keeping her gaze locked on his. He leans in, and the world outside the bathhouse completely vanishes. For a tyrant, he's being incredibly attentive right now. He leans down, his lips brushing against her skin. Flora shuts her eyes tight, her mind racing as her face burns. His touch is confident, trailing down her arm as the water splashes around them. He's taking his time, making sure she's focused on nothing but him. The tension finally snaps as he pulls her into a deep kiss. When he pulls back, he just smirks and asks her what's wrong. Flora is speechless, her head spinning from the sudden intimacy. Atil seems to be enjoying her reaction, looking more amused than anything. He lifts her up like she weighs nothing, moving her through the water. He's not done yet, leaning in for another round. They sink back into the kiss, the steam swirling around them like a curtain. In his arms, Flora starts to forget that she's supposed to be terrified of him. He looks at her with an intensity that's almost overwhelming. The cold Emperor is showing a side of himself that no one else gets to see. Flora is completely dazed, her thoughts a jumbled mess of fear and attraction. Atil pulls back for a second, looking a bit surprised by his own reaction. She hides her face against him, too embarrassed to meet his eyes after that. Hours later, the palace finally goes quiet for the night. Flora is out cold, finally getting the rest she desperately needed. but she didn't do a very good job of hiding her study materials. Atil spots something suspicious peeking out from under her pillow. He reaches out, wondering what his new empress is keeping so close. It's the love manual, and Atil is definitely going to have some questions about this. Atil looks down at his sleeping wife, the coldness in his eyes momentarily replaced by something softer. He reaches out, his fingers tracing the line of her face with unexpected gentleness. In the quiet of the night, he leans down to press a soft kiss against her cheek. Flora remains fast asleep, completely unaware of the Emperor's rare show of affection. A week passes, and the daily life of the palace continues in the tea room. Flora is joined by Cecil Brittany Nord, a man with brown hair tied back and a sharp, observant gaze. She holds a letter in her hands, her expression a mixture of surprise and anxiety. Cecil sits across from her, calmly sipping his tea while he watches her every move. The letter seems to hold significant weight for her as she reads it over carefully. A look of relief washes over Flora's face, a small smile playing on her lips. Cecil takes note of her reaction, his professional demeanor hiding his inner thoughts. After their meeting, he quietly lets himself out, his mind already working. He walks through the palace halls, his expression turning grave as he thinks. There's a weight to his gaze, the kind of look that suggests he's seen something he wasn't meant to. From a window, he watches as Flora meets a carriage outside, exchanging words with a messenger. Cecil's eyes narrow as he observes the secret exchange, his suspicions growing. As the Emperor's most trusted advisor, he knows that even the smallest secret can be a threat. Roses are in full bloom in the palace garden, but the atmosphere inside is anything but peaceful. The tyrant Emperor Atil is personally teaching Flora how to dance for the upcoming founding anniversary ball. It's not going smoothly. Flora is incredibly clumsy and keeps stomping right on his expensive boots. She's mortified, but instead of the explosion she expected, Atil remains surprisingly patient. They keep at it near the fountain, though Flora's internally screaming every time her foot makes contact with his. Eventually, Atil stops and clutches his head, looking like he's in absolute agony. Flora freezes, terrified that her bad dancing finally broke the man's spirit. He leans against a pillar, clearly fighting off one of his chronic, blinding migraines. She tentatively reaches out, wondering if there's actually anything she can do to help him. They resume the lesson, and Atil pulls her into a dip that feels a bit too intimate for just practice. Up close, Flora realizes that despite his terrifying reputation, he's carrying a lot of hidden pain. As they move to the music, the tension between them starts to shift into something else entirely. Atil looks down at her with a gaze that's almost soft. Flora finishes with a shaky curtsy, glad the lesson is finally over without any executions. Her face is glowing. Maybe the monster emperor isn't as cold-hearted as the rumors say. Suddenly, Flora leans in close, catching Atil completely off guard. She offers to give him a massage, desperately trying to show she can be useful. Atil lets her, realizing that her natural scent is the only thing that actually dulls the pain in his head. He takes her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone known for his violence. He looks at her with a slight smile, calling her his only medicine. Flora's heart skips a beat. She definitely wasn't prepared for him to be this charming. But then his eyes flash red, a cold reminder that she's still dealing with a dangerous predator. The moment breaks as they return to reality and the heavy politics of the empire. Meanwhile, a secret letter with a royal seal is waiting to stir up trouble. Cecil, Atil's aide, brings the news. A hidden message from Padania meant for Flora has been intercepted. Atil sits on his throne, his expression hardening as he weighs the possibility of betrayal. He picks up the envelope, knowing this could be the treason everyone expects from his new bride. He stares at the seal, wondering if Flora is actually the enemy spy she's supposed to be. He's conflicted. His growing feelings for her clash with the harsh reality of her origins. Cecil waits for orders, knowing a single word from Atil could end Flora's life right then and there. Atil stays silent, his mind racing through the complex political chessboard he's playing. To him, Flora is like a bird in a gilded cage. Beautiful, but potentially a deadly trap. Cecil looks away, perhaps feeling a bit of pity for the girl caught in the middle of two warring empires. Down in the dark, cold hallways of the palace, the political intrigue is getting messy. A maid is caught in the crossfire, weeping as she's interrogated about the secret letter. Cecil confronts her with the evidence, his gaze cold and completely unforgiving. The letter is handed over behind bars, a secret that's about to be used as a weapon. It's a dangerous game, especially since Atil's heart is still haunted by his lost first love, Pefmia Cecilia. He watches Flora practice her steps alone, even giving her a small round of applause. The maid finally completes her task, handing over the letter that will trigger the next disaster. Every move is being watched. and the tension is starting to reach a breaking point. Far away in Padania, Queen Mira smirks, confident that her plan to destroy the Emperor is finally in motion. Flora stares at the secret letter from Queen Mira, her heart heavy with the impossible mission she's been given. She knows that one slip-up in this nest of vipers will cost her everything. To keep up the facade of a dutiful bride, she spends her hours at her desk, carefully crafting mundane letters. But even a simple smile feels like a lie when she's carrying such a dangerous secret. The palace is breathtakingly grand, but to Flora, every corridor feels like it's closing in on her. Her every move is scrutinized, especially by Attil's formidable aide, Cecil. He's been watching the enemy bride like a hawk, waiting for her to reveal her true colors. However, the more he interacts with her, the more his cold suspicion starts to waver. Even with the servants around, the strange, quiet understanding between Cecil and Flora continues to grow. She offers him a genuine smile, a spark of warmth that he clearly wasn't expecting. For the first time, the composed aide actually falters, turning away to hide a sudden blush. In the silence, their hands brush together, sending a jolt of unexpected energy through them both. Cecil looks at her with a newfound softness, the enemy label starting to fade from his mind. Flora catches his gaze, seeing her own confusion mirrored in the depths of his eyes. He reaches out to steady her, his touch firm but surprisingly gentle. Flora leans in, her curiosity piqued by the sudden shift in this normally stern man. But the memory of the Emperor's piercing red eyes is always there, a reminder of who truly rules this place. Later that evening, Attil readies himself, his powerful presence dominating the room as Cecil assists him. Needing a moment to breathe, Flora slips away to a quiet gazebo under the stars. Bathed in the moonlight, she looks like a vision of pure innocence, far removed from the world of spies and kings. Attil finds her there, and for a moment, the tyrant is completely captivated by the sight of her. He enters the gazebo, the night air amplifying the sweet scent that acts as his only cure for madness. Flora turns to him with a shy blush, the isolation of the garden making the moment feel incredibly intimate. Attil looks down, his mind a battlefield where his duty and his growing attraction are at war. They begin to talk, and for the first time, the walls they've built around their hearts start to come down. Their fingers entwine, a simple touch that speaks louder than any of the formal words they've exchanged. Flora holds his hand tightly, her heart aching as she looks at the man she was sent to destroy. A single tear rolls down her cheek, the weight of her betrayal finally becoming too much to bear. Attil turns away, overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection he's feeling with her. He covers his face, his composure crumbling as he realizes just how deeply she's affected him. They sit together in the quiet, two people caught in a web of politics just trying to find a moment of peace. But the curse within Attil is a ticking time bomb, and the darkness is never truly gone. Suddenly, a wave of agonizing pain hits him, and he clutches his head as the madness flares up. Flora tries to reach for him, but Attil reflexively grabs her wrist with a grip of pure iron. His eyes glow with a terrifying red light as he loses himself to the violent hallucinations. Flora is frozen in shock, seeing the raw, unbridled power of the curse firsthand. Yet she doesn't pull away. She leans over him, her presence the only thing keeping him grounded. She pulls him close, letting her scent wash over him to beat back the rising shadows. But even this victory is shadowed by the cold reality of Queen Mira's plan for her daughter. Attil holds onto her like a drowning man, his body shaking as the episode slowly subsides. Flora rests her hand on his chest, her touch a silent promise that she won't leave his side. He leans in, his breath warm against her skin, as he finally finds the peace he's been searching for. Flora's heart hammers against her ribs as Attil leans in, his presence completely overwhelming. He hesitates for a fleeting second, his eyes reflecting a storm of conflicting emotions. In the moonlit gazebo, the boundaries between them blur into a single, breathless moment. Attil finally closes the distance, pulling her into a kiss that burns with a long-denied hunger. Flora loses herself in the sensation, her fingers curling into his clothes as she clings to him. It's a kiss that speaks of more than just politics or duty. It's a desperate plea for connection. Not far off, Cecil and a maid witness the intimacy, both stunned into silence by the Emperor's display of affection. When he eventually pulls away, Attil holds her face with a tenderness that feels almost alien coming from him. Flora can only stare back, her face flaming red as she tries to process the intensity of what just happened. He pulls her back into his arms, resting his head against hers in the quiet of the night. For the first time, a soft, genuine smile breaks through his mask of iron. As they say their goodnights, the air between them remains thick with the unspoken words they've shared. Flora makes her way back to her chambers, the garden feeling far less lonely than it did before. She knows her mission is a lie, but the feelings she's developing for this man are starting to feel very real. The next morning, dressed in elegant blue, Flora carries a small basket through the palace halls. She's on her way to see Atil, hoping to offer him some comfort during his busy day. Her plans are interrupted by Evelyn Graf Zaraski, who arrives with her own tray of exquisite treats. Evelyn greets her with a smile that's as cold as it is perfect, immediately establishing her dominance. She is the picture of high society grace, a reminder of the standards Flora is expected to meet. The two women stand in the hallway, an unspoken rivalry already beginning to take shape. Evelyn has been a fixture in Atil's life since childhood, a history that Flora is only just learning about. They grew up together, sharing tea and secrets long before the war changed everything. Many expected them to marry, a union that would have solidified the power of two great houses. Flora feels like an interloper as she listens to Evelyn talk about their shared past. The noblewoman's eyes are sharp, seeing right through Flora's attempts to fit in. To Evelyn, Flora is nothing more than a temporary replacement, someone to be tolerated until she can be removed. Flora keeps her head high, refusing to let the other woman's disdain rattle her. Later, she finds Atil in his private study, looking weary from the endless demands of the throne. He looks up, and for a split second, the heavy fatigue on his face is replaced by genuine surprise. Flora approaches him softly, the basket of cookies, a small shield against her own nerves. Atil doesn't say a word. He simply reaches out and gently lifts her chin to meet his gaze. The heat from his touch sends a familiar thrill through her, making her heart race all over again. She offers him a cookie, hoping the simple snack will give him the energy he needs to finish his work. He takes it, his eyes never leaving hers as he experiences a taste of home-cooked warmth. Seeing him enjoy her gift, Flora can't help but giggle, her initial nervousness melting away. The basket is soon forgotten as the two of them settle into a comfortable, quiet rhythm. She watches him with a soft smile, realizing that behind the tyrant title is just a man who is very, very tired. Atil covers his eyes, his heart aching with a mixture of relief and terrifying affection. The weight of his curse feels lighter when she's around, but the fear of hurting her still lingers. Flora reaches out, her fingers gently brushing against his arm in a silent show of support. She lets out a startled gasp as he suddenly leans into her, his defenses finally crumbling. He rests his head on her lap, falling into a deep, peaceful sleep for the first time in weeks. Deep in the night, the lights of Duke Grask's estate burn with a cold, conspiratorial glow. Inside, Flora paces the length of the hall, her movements frantic and her mind filled with dread. She clutches the letter from Queen Mira, the red wax seal mocking her with the weight of her secret mission. Desperation flickers in her eyes as she searches for any way to escape the Queen's cruel demands. Duke Grask, a man whose refined appearance masks a predatory nature, approaches her with false concern. Unable to contain her fear, Flora crumples the parchment, her face a mask of silent, agonized conflict. Her hands shake, the sound of the paper tearing under her grip, a testament to her crumbling resolve. Driven by a sudden, wild impulse, she pulls a ceremonial sword from its mount, the steel cold against her palms. She stands tall, the blade a sharp extension of her own jagged emotions and desire for freedom. Her fingers tighten around the hilt, a small part of her wishing she could simply cut through the lies. Duke Grask watches the display with a raised eyebrow, surprised by this sudden show of spirit from the Pedanian girl. But the fire in her eyes fades as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the hollow ache of reality. The sword slips from her hands and she falls to the floor, her spirit finally breaking under the impossible pressure. She weeps openly, her tears a quiet admission of the hopeless trap her own family has set for her. In her mind, she sees the shadows of the past, memories of a time when the palace was a place of ghosts and broken promises. Duke Grask kneels beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that seems kind but is purely transactional. Flora looks up at him with tear-filled eyes, desperate for any shred of genuine warmth in this cold empire. She lets him pull her into a comforting embrace, unaware that she is falling directly into his waiting trap. At the Imperial Palace, Atil makes his grand entrance into the audience chamber, his cape billowing behind him. He settles onto the throne, the weight of his crown and his curse hanging heavy on his shoulders as Cecil stands by his side. Duke Grask is already waiting there, his expression a perfect mask of loyal concern as he prepares to strike. He presents the letter he found, the red seal now serving as the ultimate evidence of Flora's supposed treachery. The shadows of suspicion loom large in the room as the Duke whispers of Pedanian lies and secret agendas. Atil looks down at the letter, his eyes cold and unreadable as he contemplates the betrayal of the one person he was starting to trust. Flora walks into the throne room, feeling the weight of every noble's gaze on her back. She kneels before Atil, who sits on his throne looking completely bored with the proceedings. She swallows hard, trying to stay calm despite her heart hammering against her ribs. Atil idly looks over a document, his expression revealing nothing of what he's thinking. Flora's eyes go wide as she realizes something about this meeting is very, very wrong. He stands up, his presence alone enough to silence the entire room. Flora starts to tremble as his shadow looms over her, dark and imposing. Without a single word, he turns his back on her and starts walking away. She watches him go, her mind spinning with confusion. Someone drops a sealed envelope right in front of her, the wax seal unbroken. She picks it up, noticing Duke Grask watching her with a sharp, suspicious look. She pulls out the letter and her face goes completely pale. This is a trap. Duke Grask waves the paper in the air, loudly accusing her of betraying the Empire. Atil stares back at him, his red eyes narrowed and cold. The Duke keeps shouting, making sure every noble in the hall hears the word treason. He points a finger right at Flora, practically demanding her execution. Atil walks back toward her, and for a second, it looks like he might actually follow through. Flora looks down, expecting the worst. But instead, he reaches out and grabs her arm. He pulls her straight into a firm hug, shielding her from the Duke's glare. Flora is completely frozen, stunned by the sudden show of protection. He tilts her chin up, making her face him while everyone else whispers. He stares deep into her eyes, his intensity making the rest of the world vanish. Flora looks away, her face heating up from the sheer proximity. She thinks back to Queen Mira's letter, realizing how deep this conspiracy goes. She swallows hard, trying to keep her breathing steady. His gloved hand brushes against her skin, sending a jolt of nerves through her. He starts leading her out of the room, his grip firm and possessive. Flora is blushing so hard, she's sure it's obvious to everyone. Once they're alone, Atil looks way more relaxed, a smug look on his face. Flora tries to swipe the letter back, but he just plays along, keeping it out of reach. He suddenly catches her wrists and pins her down onto the bed. His red eyes lock onto hers, more focused than she's ever seen them. She's out of breath as he leans in, her heart racing for a completely different reason now. He gives her a small, knowing smirk, clearly enjoying the effect he has on her. He hovers over her, the tension between them reaching a breaking point. Then, he starts shedding his shirt, revealing he's every bit the warrior he's rumored to be. Flora is pinned under him, her mind going completely blank. She's blushing intensely, unable to look him in the eye. He looks down at her with a soft smile that completely contradicts his reputation as a tyrant. She stares back at him, feeling more confused and drawn to him than ever. He leans down and plants a gentle kiss on her temple as they both settle into the quiet. Atil stays close, his presence looming over Flora as she lies on the bed. He sits up, the morning light catching the lines of his back as he starts to get dressed. Flora watches him, her hand resting on his back in a quiet moment of intimacy. He turns to give her a soft, rare smile that's reserved only for her. The scene shifts to the quiet, opulent halls of the palace as the day's business begins. Atil reveals that his secret weapon against the Duke was Palomar, Grask's own scribe who's been feeding him info. He sits at his desk, going over the evidence that's going to ruin his enemies. Cecil stands by as Atil prepares the final documents for the confrontation. The forged papers are laid out, proving that the Duke tried to frame the Empress for treason. Duke Grask is brought in, his face pale as he realizes the Emperor has him cornered. He collapses to the floor, all his previous bravado completely gone. Atil looks down at him with cold indifference, not moved by his desperate state. Grask's only hope now is that his daughter, Ibelin, can somehow salvage their family's standing. He prostrates himself, literally banging his head on the floor as he begs for mercy. He eventually heads home, looking like a broken man as he steps off the carriage. Ibelin rushes to meet him, her face filled with dread as she sees his defeated expression. He can't even look her in the eye, the weight of his humiliation too much to bear. To clear her head, Flora takes a long bath, letting the warm, rose-scented water soothe her. The maids are in full swing, making sure everything is perfect for the big night. Flora sinks deeper into the tub, finally finding a moment of peace. But Atil walks in, already dressed to the nines in his full imperial military gear. She gasps, completely exposed as she tries to hide behind the bubbles. Atil freezes at the door, his face turning a bright shade of red as he realizes his mistake. The situation is awkward as hell, with both of them just staring at each other in shock. He clears his throat and looks away, trying to act like he's not totally flustered. Flora quickly throws on a loose white shirt, her hands trembling as she buttons it up. She stands there with her damp hair, looking small and vulnerable in his oversized clothes. He looks back at her, and the sight of her like that definitely makes things more tense. He steps forward and wraps his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He hugs her from behind, leaning down to bury his face in her neck. His touch becomes a lot more bold as he pulls her closer. Flora's heart is pounding in her chest, her face flushed with heat. He pins her against the edge of the vanity, his gaze heavy and full of desire. He leans in and starts leaving soft kisses along her neck and shoulder. Flora lets out a shaky breath as he pulls her into a passionate, lingering kiss. They're so caught up in each other that they completely lose track of time. The door flies open as the maid returns with some supplies, only to freeze in her tracks. She's absolutely mortified, her jaw dropping as she realizes what she just interrupted. The two of them pull apart instantly, both looking like they've been caught red-handed. Vichy quickly starts doing Flora's hair, trying to act as professional as possible despite the chaos. Attil just stands there, watching them and looking slightly annoyed that his time was cut short. Finally, they make their way to the grand hall, ready to face the nobles at the anniversary ball. Attil and Flora make their grand entrance, drawing every eye in the ballroom as the imperial couple. Nearby, Evelyn Graf Zaraski watches them with a calculated gaze, her true feelings hidden behind a polite mask. Attil looks down at Flora with a rare, satisfied smirk, seemingly enjoying the spectacle of their debut. Evelyn's sharp, knowing smile hints at the dark plot she's about to set in motion. The music begins, and Attil leads Flora onto the dance floor for their first public dance together. Flora follows his lead perfectly, her face flushed with a mix of nerves and burgeoning happiness. While the couple is distracted by the dance, Evelyn prepares her move, holding an ornate golden goblet. She carefully pours a vial of datura sap into the wine, the poison intended for the emperor. She smiles at her reflection in the dark liquid, anticipating the chaos her plan will unleash upon the ball. Guests raise their glasses in a toast, oblivious to the deadly betrayal lurking within the celebration. Attil and Flora take their seats at the head table, the eyes of the entire nobility fixed upon them. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts as a guest slams their goblet down, the sound echoing sharply through the hall. Attil's expression darkens, a flicker of something dangerous and cold crossing his features. He pulls Flora close to him, his grip possessive as he whispers a command into her ear. Flora blushes at the sudden intimacy, her heart racing as she looks up at her husband. Later, Flora moves through the crowd, her presence as empress commanding respect and wary whispers. She pauses when she notices a maid speaking in hushed, secretive tones to a nobleman. From behind a large decorative plant, Evelyn watches Flora's every move, waiting for the poison to strike. Seeking a moment of quiet, Flora steps out onto the balcony, the cool night air, a welcome relief from the heat of the hall. She leans against the railing, her thoughts a whirlwind of the night's events and her evolving feelings for Attil. The shadow of her past and the weight of her new imperial life seem to converge in the moonlight. A nobleman approaches her on the terrace, his unexpected presence interrupting her brief moment of peace. Inside the hall, the mood begins to sour as the guests sense a strange tension in the air. In a dark omen, a goblet topples and spills its contents across the table like a pool of blood. The datura poison finally takes its toll, and Attil's vision is stained with a blood-red, murderous hue. Flora looks back into the ballroom, her eyes widening in horror as she realizes something is terribly wrong. The sound of shattering glass rings out as the celebration descends into absolute terrifying panic. Attil draws his sword, his movements erratic and filled with a wild, mindless intent. He towers over a terrified noble, the blade gleaming under the ballroom's grand chandeliers. People scramble to escape as the emperor, now a rampaging beast, begins his violent assault. In the chaos, Flora is shoved aside by the fleeing crowd, struggling to stay on her feet. She runs back toward Attil, desperate to reach him even as the danger becomes life-threatening. She trips and falls, the cold floor of the ballroom a stark contrast to the earlier warmth of the evening. Attil stands amidst the wreckage he's created, his silhouette casting a long, intimidating shadow. He looks down at Flora, but there's no recognition in his eyes, only a cold, predatory frenzy. He reaches out with terrifying speed, his movements no longer those of a man in control. Flora's feet dangle as she is hoisted up, the festive atmosphere completely shattered by the Emperor's madness. Attil's hand closes around her throat, his strength overpowering as he pins her against a pillar. Flora gasps for air, her hands clutching at his iron-like arm as she stares into his mindless red eyes. Tears stream down her face as she realizes the man she was starting to trust has completely vanished. Attil's face is twisted in a mask of pure, unbridled rage, the poison completely overriding his soul. He forces her to look at him, his touch now a terrifying display of his total loss of control. Attil's eyes pulse with a dying red light as the madness of the datura poison finally begins to recede from his mind. Flora gazes back at him, her neck marked with the evidence of his earlier loss of control, yet her expression remains full of empathy. Slowly, the predatory glare in Attil's eyes fades, replaced by a confused and weary clarity as he finally recognizes his wife. Flora winces slightly, the reality of the near-fatal encounter settling in as she feels the lingering sting on her throat. Despite the terrifying marks on her skin, she offers him a small, reassuring smile, trying to comfort the man who just attacked her. Back in their private quarters, a chest of medicinal vials is prepared to treat the injuries sustained during the night's chaos. With a steady hand, Attil applies a soothing ointment to the dark bruises on Flora's neck, his touch now slow and careful. Kneeling before her, the Emperor personally tends to the wounds he himself inflicted in his drug-induced frenzy. After finishing, Attil stands and turns away toward the window, his posture stiff with a guilt he doesn't know how to express. A heavy, contemplative silence hangs in the air of the grand bedchamber as Flora sits quietly, watching him. Attil reaches out to touch her neck once more, his thumb grazing the delicate skin, as if he can't believe his own capacity for violence. He looks down at her with a haunted expression, the weight of his actions visible in the set of his jaw. Flora looks up at him with a tender, forgiving gaze, her heart aching for his inner turmoil more than her own physical pain. He takes her hand in his touch tentative, as if he's afraid he might break her if he holds on too tightly. Flora's cheeks flush as she feels the warmth of his hand, her earlier fear completely replaced by a deep sense of connection. Suddenly, Attil pulls her into a firm embrace, hiding his face against her as if seeking sanctuary from his own demons. He holds her tightly, his powerful frame trembling slightly as he silently grapples with the aftermath of the poisoning. For a moment, the fearsome Emperor looks fragile, clinging to the one person who doesn't look at him with terror. Flora relaxes into his arms, her hands coming up to return the hug as she realizes how much he needs her presence. She closes her eyes and smiles, a sense of peace finally washing over her after the long, traumatic night. Deep within Attil's eye, the reflection of Flora's smiling face becomes the only light in his dark, tormented world. Flora pulls back slightly and looks up at him with a curious, noticing the newfound softness in his features. Attil responds by gently lifting a lock of her golden hair and pressing a tender, lingering kiss to it. Attil is sitting on the edge of the bed, looking completely drained. Flora stands close by, trying to be useful. He suddenly pulls her toward him, resting his head heavily against her shoulder. He takes a deep breath, burying his face in her neck as if searching for something. Flora is frozen, but he just stays there, finding relief in her natural scent. The atmosphere shifts as the Emperor lets his guard down for a moment. He moves from her shoulder to a real kiss, surprising them both. It's a soft, lingering moment that feels out of place for a man known as a tyrant. Flora is left dazed, her face flushed as she tries to catch her breath. Attil pulls back with a faint, rare smile on his face. He pulls her into a tight embrace, holding her like she's his only lifeline. Flora finally lets go of her fear and leans into him, resting her head on his chest. The world outside the bedroom door seems to vanish for a few minutes. Later that night, Flora lies awake in the dark, unable to sleep. She looks at the man sleeping soundly beside her, wondering who he really is. The image of the monster who supposedly killed his brother feels so distant right now. Even in his sleep, he doesn't let go of her. She studies his features, trying to find the tyrant everyone talks about. Suddenly, his eyes snap open, cold and sharp as ever. The next morning, Cecil is reviewing documents when he finds something alarming. He immediately takes the suspicious letter to Attil. The aide looks worried. This message from Queen Mira changes everything. After the chaos of the anniversary ball, the room is quiet again. Attil sits with Flora, the weight of the night still hanging over them. He starts to open up, telling her the truth about the madness that plagues him. It all goes back 12 years, to a time when he and his brother Alaric were still close. They used to spar like any other brothers, but the court was full of poison. The nobles didn't want a mistress's child like him taking the throne. They turned to dark magic to ruin him, forcing a cursed drink down his throat. The agony of the black magic was unlike anything he'd ever felt. It tore at his mind, leaving him gasping for air. A sorceress cast the final seal, binding his soul to a curse of madness. He felt the darkness taking root, dragging his sanity down with it. His eyes turned red, the permanent mark of the monster they had made. Violence broke out as he lost control, spilling blood for the first time. He fled the capital, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. He rode until his horse couldn't go any further, deep into the frontier. Wounded and alone, he eventually collapsed in a quiet field. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw a girl standing among the daisies. It was Pephmia Cecilia, the first person who didn't look at him with fear. He passed out again, surrendering to the peaceful scent of the flowers. Later, he woke up in a proper bed, his wounds carefully bandaged. Pephmia was right there, greeting him with a fresh bouquet of the same flowers. Pephmia was the only light in Attil's dark world for a long time. She cared for him without asking for anything in return, giving him the childhood he'd been robbed of. But eventually, he had to leave her behind, and the memory of her has haunted him ever since. Back in the present, Flora is left speechless by the tragic story of the Emperor's past. Attil sits beside her, the vulnerability he just showed quickly being replaced by a dark, heavy silence. Flora tries to tell him that she's the one who should be sorry, but she can tell he's already pulling away. She sits on the edge of the bed, realizing for the first time that the tyrant is just a man broken by a curse. Attil stands up, his presence suddenly feeling cold and imposing once again. He turns to her, his red eyes burning with an intensity that makes her heart skip a beat. He suddenly grabs her hand, pulling her toward him with a firm, inescapable grip. Flora searches his face for any sign of the boy she just heard about, but he's gone. Instead, he's looking right through her, his mind still stuck on the ghost of the girl he couldn't save. He can still see Pephmia's face so clearly, and the comparison is tearing him apart. He reaches out to touch Flora's cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a strange sadness. He knows she isn't her, but in this moment, he's too weak to care about the difference. Flora can feel the conflict in him, and it makes her feel more like a replacement than ever. She looks down, unable to meet his gaze as the weight of her role as a substitute bride sinks in. Attil continues to study her, his gaze dropping to the curve of her lips. He leans in, his face inches from hers as he stares at her with a mix of hunger and pain. Flora's eyes well up with tears, caught between her fear and the pity she feels for him. She looks at him one last time, seeing only the broken shell of the man he used to be. Attil admits that he would have never endured the agony of the curse if he'd known it would lead here. He holds her hands, his voice trembling as he reveals the full extent of his suffering. Flora listens in silence, her heart breaking for the man who was never allowed to just be a child. Suddenly, he snaps and pulls her into a fierce, almost violent embrace. He holds her so tightly she can barely breathe, as if he's trying to hold his own sanity together. Flora just lets him, realizing that her scent is the only thing keeping him from the brink. He wraps his arms around her waist, burying his face deep in her neck. The atmosphere in the room turns frantic as the Emperor's desperation becomes palpable. He breathes her in, the natural fragrance of her skin acting as his only medicine. His eyes are wide and haunted, the curse clearly clawing at the edges of his mind. He pulls back just enough to look at her, his expression a terrifying mix of love and obsession. He pins her down with his hands on her shoulders, his strength far beyond her own. He crashes his lips against hers in a kiss that is more of an assault than a gesture of affection. Flora is completely overwhelmed, her hands clutching at his bare chest in shock. He pulls her even closer, his touch becoming possessive as he loses himself in her presence. The kiss deepens, and for a moment, Attil seems to completely forget who he is. Flora closes her eyes and gives in, knowing there's no way to escape the man he's become. He moves down to her neck, his teeth sinking into her delicate skin in a sharp, possessive bite. He's marking her as his property, a physical sign that she belongs to him and him alone. Flora lets out a sharp gasp of pain, her fingers tangling in his hair as she endures it. When he finally lets go, she's left gasping on the bed, his marks a vivid reminder of the price of his sanity. Attil stares at her, the crimson in his eyes flickering as he begins to regain his composure. He reaches out, his fingers brushing the mark he left on her shoulder as if he can't believe what he's done. Without a word, he pulls her gown back up, hiding the evidence of his temporary madness. He looks away, the heavy silence between them filled with his unspoken regret. He stands and walks away, leaving Flora alone on the bed to process the whirlwind of emotions he just unleashed. He casts one last look back at her, his expression a complicated mix of longing and self-loathing. He sinks onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands as he struggles to keep the darkness at bay. For a moment, it feels as though they are trapped together in a cage of thorns, unable to escape the destiny that binds them. Attil grits his teeth, determined to protect her from himself, even if it means keeping his distance. Flora lies there, her heart still racing, wondering what her life has become in this gilded cage. She stares into the darkness, knowing that she is now irrevocably tied to the man who both terrifies and fascinates her. Outside her window, the lights of the palace signal the arrival of the anniversary ball. Evelyn Graf-Zaraski is already preparing her move, a deceptive smile playing on her lips. She meets with Cecil Brittany Nord, trying to gauge how much the Emperor's inner circle knows. Cecil watches her with his sharp, observant eyes, sensing the malice she tries so hard to hide. Evelyn recalls the moment she saw Flora at the center of attention, a sight that fueled her jealousy and rage. She takes a slow sip of her tea, her mind spinning with a plot to reclaim her place at the Emperor's side. She knows that to win, she must first remove the substitute who has stolen her spotlight. At the ball, Attil sits on his throne with Flora on his lap, a display of power and possession that shocks the court. Watching from the sidelines, Evelyn's mask of innocence begins to crack. Cecil stands nearby, ever watchful, knowing that this night is far from over. In a quiet corner of the palace, Evelyn vents her frustration to her confidant, unable to contain her bitterness. She accidentally knocks her cup to the floor, the spilled liquid a dark reflection of the chaos she intends to cause. The realization that Attil might truly care for the girl makes her blood boil with hatred. Her eyes burn with a lethal intensity as she decides on the ultimate betrayal. She will stop at nothing to see Flora broken and Attil returning to her arms. High above, the palace chandeliers cast a cold, brilliant light on the dark schemes unfolding below. Meanwhile, Queen Mira receives a report, her expression cold and calculating as she reviews her own plans. She smiles, a chilling, predatory look that confirms she has no mercy for those who stand in her way. She examines a small jewelry box, though it's not the gold she's interested in, but the power it brings. She produces a small vial of purple liquid, a potent potion designed to trigger the Emperor's madness. She hands the vial to Madame Beate, the woman who once tormented Flora, sending her to deliver the final blow.